The vast chamber of the Galactic Concord hummed with the low thrum of translators and the occasional flicker of holographic displays. Rows of delegates from a dozen worlds sat in tiered seats, their forms a kaleidoscope of biology, crystalline exoskeletons, gaseous wisps contained in force fields, furred bipeds with too many eyes. At the far end, the human delegation occupied a modest alcove, 3 figures in simple jumpsuits, looking almost quaint amid the opulence. Captain Elena Vasquez leaned forward, her dark eyes scanning the central podium where the current speaker droned on. She was the anchor of the team, steady and unyielding, the kind of leader who had stared down asteroid storms without flinching. Her hands, calloused from years on colony rigs, rested lightly on the arm of her chair. Beside her, Dr. Raj Patel adjusted his glasses, a habit from Earthside labs he couldn't shake even in zero-G. Raj was the thinker, cautious to a fault, his mind a web of contingencies and data points. He murmured into his comm, "The Vorath proposal is gaining traction. If it passes, our mining rights on Epsilon 4 evaporate." Across from them, Lieutenant Kira Voss cracked her knuckles, her wiry frame coiled like a spring. Kira was the spark, witty, impulsive, the one who'd once hot-wired a shuttle to evade pirates. "Let him talk," she whispered, flashing a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Humans didn't climb out of the gravity well by sweet-talking gas bags. Elena shot her a sidelong glance, the barest warning in her nod. The Concord sessions were marathon affairs, but this one carried weight. Earth, barely a century into the stars, sought formal recognition as a full-member world. It wasn't just prestige, it meant access to shared tech, defense pacts, and the all-important trade lanes that could lift billions from scarcity. But the Vorath Syndicate, those hulking reptilian traders with their iron grip on rare minerals, saw humanity as upstarts poaching their markets. The speaker, a tentacled envoy from the Aquiline Collective, wrapped up with a flourish of bioluminescent lights. The chamber's lights dimmed slightly as the moderator, a neutral AI orb hovering at center, intoned, "Next agenda, petition for membership ascension, Sol System representative." Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral. This was their moment. She stood, smoothing her jumpsuit, and approached the podium. The platform rose smoothly on anti-grav, positioning her before the assembly. Holoscreens activated, projecting Earth's profile, blue marble against the void, overlaid with stats on population, tech index, exploratory feats. "Esteemed delegates," Elena began, her voice clear through the universal translator, "humanity offers partnership, not dominance. We've tamed our world through ingenuity, survived wars and voids alike. In return, we bring adaptable minds, resilient crews, and a commitment to the Concord's principles." Murmurs rippled through the seats. A Vorath delegate, its scales glinting like oil slicks, leaned forward, mandibles clicking. "Ingenuity? You mean scavenging our scraps? Your ships limp on fusion scraps while we forge stars." Raj stiffened in his seat, fingers flying over his tablet to pull counter data. Kira muttered under her breath, "Easy there, lizard breath. We've got teeth too." Elena pressed on, undeterred. "We've mapped uncharted nebulae, engineered habitats on barren rocks. Our grit builds bridges, literal and figurative. Consider our proposal, joint ventures on Epsilon 4, sharing yields equitably." The chamber stirred. A gaseous delegate from the Nebula clans vented a plume of iridescent mist, signaling approval. But the Vorath hissed, activating their own holofeed, a simulation of human mining ops, accidentally destabilizing a Vorath outpost. "Reckless. Your kind rushes in, leaves ruin." Tension thickened the air, recyclers struggling against the rising heat of debate. Elena felt the weight of it, the eyes of a galaxy judging her species' worth. Back home, billions watched via delayed feed, holding breath for a future unbound by isolation. As rebuttals fired across the floor, Raj leaned toward Kira. "Their sims fudged. If I can isolate the data stream." Kira's eyes lit up. "Hack it mid-speech? Risky, but yeah. Give me 30 seconds. Elena caught their exchange from the podium, a flicker of trust passing between them. The vote loomed, but cracks were forming. The Vorath pushed harder, demanding a recess to consult allies, their influence pulling strings in shadowed alliances. The moderator's orb pulsed. Debate continues. Sole Representative, your response. Elena straightened, drawing on that core of steel Earth had forged in her. We respond with action, not words. Watch. In the alcove, Raj initiated the subtle override, his cautious fingers dancing. Kira monitored the feeds, her wit sharpening into focus. The chamber's hum faltered as anomalies flickered, Vorith data glitching, revealing unaltered logs of stable ops. Gasps echoed. The reptilian delegate recoiled, scales paling. Elena seized the moment. Truth over fabrication. That's humanity. But as cheers mixed with outrage, a deeper rumble shook the chamber, alarms blaring from the station's core. Lights stuttered, gravity fluctuating. An external breach? Sabotage? The delegates panicked, seats emptying in chaos. Elena vaulted from the podium, racing back to her team. Vorith play? We need to move, now. Raj paled. Worse. Core integrity failing. If it goes, the whole station drops into the singularity field. Kira grabbed an emergency kit from under her seat. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her shuttle seat, the hum of the engines vibrating through her bones as they descended toward the orbital platform. The view outside the viewport was a mesmerizing swirl of stars and the faint glow of the alien megastructure, a colossal ring encircling their distant sun. Her team, 3 humans, the only ones bold enough to volunteer for this first contact madness, sat in tense silence. Beside her, Dr. Kai Rin fidgeted with his data slate, his cautious nature evident in the way he double-checked readings every few seconds. Across the aisle, Lena Torres cracked her knuckles, her witty grin masking the adrenaline she thrived on. Think they'll buy the pitch? Lena asked, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. Kai glanced up, pushing his glasses higher. If our simulations hold, yes. But simulations aren't handshakes. One wrong variable and we're the punchline in their history books. Ilara didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the docking bay lights flashing in sequence. Brave didn't mean reckless. She'd led mining ops through asteroid storms, but this was different. No drills or suits here, just words and whatever grit they could muster. The shuttle lurched as clamps engaged, and the ramp hissed open to a corridor of polished obsidian, lit by bioluminescent veins pulsing like living arteries. Their escorts waited, 3 figures from the Vexery delegation, tall and ethereal, skin shimmering with iridescent scales. The lead one, Ambassador Lirith, inclined their head in what passed for a greeting among their kind, no smiles, just a subtle shift in posture. Humans of Earth. The chamber awaits. Speak your proposal. Ilara stepped forward first, her boots echoing softly. The air smelled of ozone and something floral, alien yet not unpleasant. As they walked, Kai whispered updates from his slate. Atmospheric match, no toxins, but the gravity felt off, lighter by a fraction. Lena shot him a look. Relax, Doc. We're not melting yet. The chamber was vast, a dome of translucent crystal overlooking the ring's inner curve, where habitats floated like jewels on invisible threads. A circular table dominated the center, ringed by holographic displays flickering with data streams in Vexery script. More delegates assembled, about a dozen, their forms varying from slender diplomats to bulkier advisors, all watching with unblinking eyes. Lirith gestured to seats that molded to their shapes upon contact. The Resource Accord. Your world seeks alliance against the void storms. Explain why we should divert our arcs. Ilara settled in, her mind racing through the brief. The void storms were the external threat, rogue energy waves tearing through the sector, disrupting trade routes and threatening colonies. Earth's position on the fringe made it a buffer, but without Vexery tech, humanity's outposts would crumble. The cost was clear, ships lost, lives hanging by sensor threats. She leaned forward, voice steady. We've mapped the storm patterns. Your arcs shield entire systems, but our probes show a weak point in the core flux. We offer our navigation arrays, human ingenuity and predictive modeling. Combined, we stabilize the front. Kai projected a hollow map, stars blooming into a web of trajectories. The delegates murmured, scales rippling in what might have been intrigue. One, a wiry advisor named Thaler, probed with a series of clicks translated by the comms. Your models predict? Or guess? We've lost vessels to such optimism. Lena jumped in before Alara could, her tone light but pointed. Predict with teeth. We don't guess, we adapt. Last storm hit our relay, fried half the grid. But we rerouted power from the core in under an hour. No arcs needed. The chamber fell to a hush, the holograms casting blue shadows across faces. Lyritha's eyes narrowed, processing. Alara felt the weight of it, the risk of dismissal, the consequence of isolation if they failed. But there was a spark, a subtle lean forward from the group. The pitch was landing, fragile as it was. As discussions deepened, an alert pinged on Kai's slate, storm activity spiking earlier than forecasted. He paled, whispering to Alara. It's accelerating. If they don't commit now. She nodded, masking the knot in her stomach. Time to push harder. Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the negotiation table, her knuckles whitening against the polished obsidian surface. The chamber's air hummed with the low thrum of alien translators, but now it carried an undercurrent of unease, like the pause before a storm. Across from her, the Krell ambassador, Zorith, leaned forward on his multiple limbs, his iridescent exoskeleton catching the dim light from the overhead projectors. His compound eyes flickered, scanning the holographic display that still flickered with the aftermath of Earth's silent transmission. A vast, unyielding wall of encrypted data, beautiful in its impenetrable complexity. Captain, Zoritha's voice rasped through the translator, a sound like grinding stones. Your gesture was noted. But silence is not alliance. The Veil sector storms rage unchecked, and your human vessel drifts perilously close. Explain this, speaking without words, or we retract our offer of safe passage. Alara's second-in-command, Lieutenant Marco Reyes, shifted beside her, his fingers twitching toward the comm panel embedded in his wrist. Marco was the cautious one, always calculating odds, his dark eyes darting between the ambassador and the chamber's sealed doors. He'd argued against the transmission back on the bridge, too risky, too bold, but Alara had seen the fire in the crew's eyes, the grit that had carried them through the wormhole breach. Humans didn't beg, they built bridges or burned them. She straightened, meeting Zoritha's gaze without flinching. Ambassador, Earth's response isn't meant for translation. It's a foundation. Your storms are tearing apart the sector's trade lanes, stranding ships like ours. We've mapped the anomalies, patterns your sensors missed because they pulse in frequencies tied to your own atmospheric shields. Zoritha's limbs clicked in agitation, a sound Alara had learned meant doubt. The third presence in their small delegation, Dr. Lena Kai, the Xenotech specialist, cleared her throat softly. Lena was the witty core of the team, her sharp mind hidden behind a veil of quiet observation, but now her voice cut through the tension like a laser. Think of it as a puzzle, Zorith. Your people excel at crystalline structures, perfect for containing chaos. Our data weaves human algorithms with your lattice tech. Decode it together and we stabilize the storms. Ignore it and the next rift swallows your outpost on Epsilon Prime. The ambassador paused, his eyes dilating as he interfaced directly with the hologram. The chamber's lights dimmed slightly, the projection swelling to show swirling vortexes of plasma, laced with threads of human-coded light. Alara felt Marco's hand brush hers under the table, a subtle signal of support, his caution yielding to the plan's momentum. But as Zorith delved deeper, a faint alarm chimed from the walls, the chamber's AI detecting an irregularity in the data flow. Zorith recoiled, his exoskeleton flaring with warning colors. This intrusion. It probes our core protocols. Is this your ingenuity, Captain? Or sabotage? Alara's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. The transmission had been designed to interface, not invade, but the storm's interference must have warped it, turning invitation into threat. Marco leaned in, whispering urgently, "We pull back now or they lock us out." Lena's eyes narrowed, already tapping her own device, rerouting the code midstream. "No," Alara said aloud to Zorith and her team alike. "It's adapting. Let it sink, trust the silence." The chamber fell quieter still, the hologram pulsing like a shared heartbeat, as the first fragile bridge of understanding began to form amid the digital storm. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her seat in the dim glow of the assembly chamber, the air thick with the hum of translators and the faint ozone scent of alien tech. Her team, Dr. Liam Chin, the cautious xenolinguist who fidgeted with his data pad, and Mira, the wiry engineer whose tools clinked softly in her belt, sat nearby, their faces etched with the strain of the past day's negotiations. Across the vast circular floor, the delegate from the Vorath Collective loomed, its segmented body casting long shadows under the floating luminaries. The Vorath had demanded Earth's mineral rights on Epsilon Eridani, claiming some ancient treaty that predated humanity's first warp jump. Elena's silent refusal in the last session had bought them time, but now the chamber buzzed with impatience. "They're bluffing," Liam whispered, his voice barely cutting through the murmur. He adjusted his glasses, eyes darting to the holographic display projecting Earth's response. A simple map overlay showing the colony's fragile ecosystem. No words, just data points highlighting the irreplaceable biodiversity. It was Earth's way, let the facts speak, as they always had back home in heated boardrooms or tense family dinners. Elena nodded slightly, but doubt gnawed at her. The plan had been to present the environmental data quietly, letting the other delegates see the cost without the bombast of speeches. Vorath posturing relied on spectacle. Humanity's edge was precision. But as the Vorath delegates' mandibles clicked in what Elena's implant translated as derisive laughter, she felt the room's atmosphere shift. A ripple of unease spread among the smaller species reps, the avian Lyraxi fluttering their feathers, the crystalline Centauri pulsing with dimmer lights. Mira leaned in, her breath steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. "If this backfires, Cap, we're looking at embargo. No resupply for the colony. Those kids on Eridani." She trailed off, her fingers tracing the edge of a small device in her pocket. A jury-rigged signal jammer, their ace if things went south. Before Elena could respond, the Vorath delegate activated its projection. A swirling vortex of red holograms depicting Vorath mining fleets stripping asteroids bare, efficient and relentless. "Primitives cling to dirt," it intoned through the translators, the words dripping with condescension. "Yield or watch your fragile world wither." The chamber fell into a hush, delegates leaning forward. Elena's heart pounded. This was the moment. Their data should counter it, showing how Vorath extraction would poison the water tables, doom the native flora that the colony depended on for oxygen scrubbers. She tapped her console, releasing the overlay. For a beat, silence. Then, a low murmur. The Lyraxi delegate tilted its head, scrutinizing the projections. Elena held her breath, willing the numbers to land. Projected species loss at 47%, atmospheric rebound time of 200 cycles. But the Voratha's display adapted, overlaying its own filters, dismissing the data as inconclusive human models, laced with errors from primitive sensors. Liam cursed under his breath. "They're hacking the feed. Look at the timestamps, falsified." Elena's plan cracked. The early presentation, meant to build quiet alliances, now unraveled in real time as doubt seeded the room. A Centauri delegate dimmed further, signaling withdrawal of support. Myra's hand hovered near her jammer, but Elena shook her head. No escalation yet. Not here. Rising, Elena stepped to the floor's edge, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Delegates, the Vorath speak of efficiency, but efficiency without foresight is destruction. Our colony isn't a footnote, it's a foothold for all of us against the void." The Vorath word advancing a limb. Words from the young. "Prove your claim or step aside." Tension coiled like a spring. Elena glanced at her team, Liam's wide eyes urging caution, Myra's jaw set for action. The chamber's lights seemed to dim, the weight of unseen eyes from 100 worlds pressing down. Earth's silence had spoken once, but now with the plan faltering, they needed more than data. They needed a spark. As the Voratha's projection swelled, threatening to drown their overlay, Mira slipped the jammer free. "Now or never," she muttered. With a flick she activated it, not to disrupt but to amplify. The human display sharpened, cutting through the interference like a knife through fog, revealing unaltered scans of Voratha's past failures. Barren worlds left in their wake, ghosts of ecosystems long dead. Gasps echoed, feathered, crystalline, mechanical. The Vorath froze, its segments rattling. Elena seized the moment, her voice steady. "We've seen your efficiency before. Join us or repeat history alone." The chamber stirred, alliances shifting in the balance. But as the Vorath recoiled, Elena caught a flicker in its optics, retaliation brewing. The cost was coming, swift and unseen. The dim hum of the assembly chamber's life support systems was the only sound left, a mechanical whisper that underscored the void. Ambassador Lena Vasquez stood at the podium, her hands steady despite the ache in her shoulders from hours of tension. Around her, the alien delegates shifted in their ergonomic seats, forms that defied easy description, all iridescent scales and multifaceted eyes that caught the light like shattered prisms. The Vortari envoy, with its elongated neck arched in what Lena had learned was agitation, finally broke the stasis. "Your silence is not wisdom," it hissed through the translator, the words dripping with synthetic venom. "It is cowardice. Earth refuses to yield the frontier worlds, yet offers no counterproposal. Do you mock the concordance?" Lena met those swirling eyes without flinching. She was no diplomat by training, a geologist yanked from the Martian outpost when the first contact protocols activated, but her crew back on the Endurance had drilled her on this. Humans didn't win by shouting, they won by enduring. "We're not mocking anyone," she said, her voice calm, carrying the faint lilt of her Texan roots. "We're listening. And we're choosing our words carefully because lives hang on them." Beside her, Captain Elias Thorne gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. He was the cautious one, the engineer who'd patched the ship's hull after that ion storm 2 sectors back. His eyes flicked to the holographic display, where readouts from the human colony on Epsilon Eridani pulsed red. Resource shortages escalating, the rival Krell fleet massing just beyond the neutral zone. "Lena," he murmured, low enough for only her to hear, "if we don't push back now, they'll starve our people out." She nodded subtly, her mind racing through the contingency plans. The early proposal, to share terraforming tech in exchange for mining rights, had backfired spectacularly. The Vortari had twisted it into an accusation of cultural imperialism, and the chamber had erupted into a cacophony of alien dialects until the presiding AI enforced a recess. Now, with the stakes raw and exposed, Lena felt the weight of 9 billion souls pressing down. The chamber's central orb, a nexus of glowing filaments representing the galactic concordance, flickered as another delegate spoke, a squat, chitinous Thraxian whose voice buzzed like disturbed hornets. "Earth's ingenuity is renowned, yet here it falters. Yield the chambers or face isolation. Your grit will not shield you from the void." Elias leaned forward, unable to hold back. "Isolation? We've crossed stars on ships we built from scrap. You think a blockade scares us?" His words were sharp, born of the long hauls where he jury-rigged reactors with nothing but willpower and wire. But Lena shot him a glance, steady, brotherly, and he subsided, jaw tight. She stepped closer to the orb, her boots echoing softly on the polished deck. In her pocket, the small data crystal warmed against her thigh, encoded with the real proposal, not words but schematics. Human designs for adaptive habitats that could thrive in the harsh fringes, shared freely but with safeguards. It was a gamble, exposing their tech could invite theft, but it was honest, a bridge built from necessity. As the delegates leaned in, murmuring, Lena activated the crystal's projection. Lines of light bloomed in the air, intricate lattices of alloy and bioweave unfolding into models of resilient domes, water recyclers that mimicked Earth's own cycles. No speeches, no demands, just the quiet proof of what humanity could forge from desperation. The Vortari recoiled slightly, its neck coiling. This is no concession. It is a challenge." Lena smiled faintly, the first real one since boarding the station. "It's an invitation. Build with us or watch us build alone." Tension rippled through the chamber, the air thick with unspoken calculations. Elias exhaled slowly, his hand brushing hers in silent support, their camaraderie a tether in the alien sea. Outside, through the viewport, the stars wheeled indifferently, but down on Epsilon, the colony's lights still burned, defiant against the gathering shadows. Yet as the projection stabilized, a new alert chimed on the console. Krell scouts breaching the perimeter. The real test wasn't in the chamber anymore, it was out there where words failed and actions carved the future. Lena's fingers tightened around the edge of the console, the cool metal biting into her skin as the holographic display flickered erratically. The chamber's vast dome hummed with the low thrum of failing life support systems, and the air grew thicker, laced with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Across from her, the Zorathian delegate, Crix, paced with his segmented limbs clicking against the floor, his multifaceted eyes darting between the humans and the swirling chaos on the screen. Tom, ever the steady one, hunched over his datapad, muttering calculations under his breath, his brow furrowed in that familiar line of quiet determination. "We can't hold this vector much longer," Tom said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. He glanced up, wiping sweat from his forehead. The asteroid field's shifting faster than predicted. "If we don't reroute the shields now, the next impact will breach the hull." Crix stopped pacing, his mandibles clacking in what Lena knew was frustration. "Your primitive engines are the problem, human. The Zorath fleet could have navigated this debris in half the time. Why insist on this solo traversal? It's suicide." Lena shot him a sharp look, her wit surfacing despite the knot in her gut. "Because we're not here to beg for your escort, Crix. Earth's made it this far on our own grit. Now help her get out of the way." She turned back to the display, where red alerts pulsed like wounds across the ship's schematic. The plan had been simple: slip through the Calyx belt to reach the neutral summit on time, proving humanity's independence. But the belt's rogue gravitational pulls had turned it into a gauntlet, and their initial evasion maneuver had only wedged them deeper into the storm. Tom's fingers flew across the controls, initiating a secondary burn. The ship groaned in response, a deep vibration rattling through the deck. For a moment, hope flickered. The holograph showed a narrow gap widening just ahead. "There," Tom breathed, pushing thrusters to maximum. "Hold on." The chamber lurched as the engines roared, stars streaking past the viewports in blurred lines. Lena braced against the console, her heart pounding in sync with the alarms. Crix skittered to a handhold, his exoskeleton gleaming under the emergency lights. Then, without warning, the gap slammed shut. A massive chunk of rock, unseen in the sensor blind spot, hurtled toward them. The impact alarm screamed. "Evade. Now!" Lena shouted, slamming the override. Tom yanked the controls, but it was too late. The ship shuddered violently, sparks erupting from the console as secondary systems fried. The holograph shattered into static, leaving only the ominous red glow of emergency protocols. Alarms wailed, and the air recyclers wheezed, pulling in the stale, metallic scent of fear. Crix released a series of rapid clicks, his equivalent of a curse. "Your ingenuity fails you. The summit will proceed without Earth's voice." "Pathetic." Lena ignored him, hauling herself up as the ship stabilized into a precarious spin. Pain shot through her shoulder from the jolt, but she pushed it down, focusing on Tom. He was already prying open a panel, tools in hand, his cautious nature giving way to focused action. "Shields are at 23%, he reported, voice steady despite the chaos. "But I've got an idea. The auxiliary power grid, we can shunt it to the maneuvering thrusters, use the field's gravity to slingshot us out. Risky, but it might work." She nodded, grabbing a toolkit from the wall. "Do it. Crix, if you're not helping, at least monitor the external scans. We need eyes on that next wave." The Zorathian hesitated, his eyes narrowing, but then he scuttled to the auxiliary station, mandibles working silently. As Tom exposed the wiring, sparks flying like angry fireflies, Lena felt the weight of it all: the isolation of the belt, the ticking clock to the summit, the fragile alliance hanging by this thread. One wrong move, and Earth's first real shot at galactic standing would end in debris. Wires hissed as Tom connected the bypass, his hands steady even as sweat dripped onto the circuits. "Rerouting now." On 3, the ship bucked again, a smaller fragment glancing off the hull with a deafening clang. Lena's world tilted, but she held fast, counting with him. The engines surged, not with raw power, but with a clever pulse, harnessing the asteroid's pull like a sail catching wind. The spin slowed, the chamber's hum shifting to something almost rhythmic. For the first time since the alarms began, a sliver of blue sky, or what passed for it in this nebula-shrouded void, appeared on the viewport. They were breaking free. But as the ship steadied, a new alert pinged. Hull integrity compromised, atmosphere leaking from the lower decks. The cost was real, and the summit loomed closer, demanding they arrive not just alive, but unbroken. Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The holographic display flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the cramped bridge of the Endeavor. Outside the viewport, the asteroid field's debris spun lazily, but inside, time felt frozen in the grip of impending crisis. "Ozen. Status on the auxiliary thrusters?" she barked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Lieutenant Rao, her chief engineer, wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers flying over the diagnostic panel. "Offline, Captain." The micrometeorite swarm clipped the relays. "We're dead in the water for another hour minimum." He glanced up, his dark eyes meeting hers with that familiar mix of determination and doubt. Rao was the cautious one, always double-checking schematics, but now even he looked frayed. From the navigation station, Dr. Lena Kirk shot them a wry smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Well, that's just peachy. The Krell patrol will be back any minute, and they've got us pinned like a bug on a slide." Kirk was the wit in their trio, her sarcasm a shield against the void's indifference. She jury-rigged half the ship's sensors from scavenged parts during their outbound voyage, but this was beyond even her clever fixes. Ilara nodded, forcing her mind to the problem. The Krell, those hulking cephalopod traders with their armada of blockade runners, had ambushed them en route to the neutral outpost. Not for piracy. No, they wanted the Endeavor's cargo. The prototype terraformer, Earth's gift to the galaxy, meant to prove human ingenuity in reclaiming barren worlds. If the Krell seized it, they'd twist the tech into weapons and Earth's fragile diplomatic standing would shatter. "Options?" Ilara said, pushing off the console to pace the narrow deck. Her boots thudded softly, a rhythm to think by. The ship groaned under the strain of emergency power, lights dimming as the reactor conserved energy. Rao straightened. "We could vent the forward bays, create a debris cloud to mask our signature. Buy time for repairs." Kirk snorted, leaning back in her chair. "And alert every scanner within a light year? The Krell have sniffers that could track a whisper." "No, we need something they won't expect." Ilara's gaze drifted to the viewport, where a massive boulder tumbled past, its surface pitted and ancient. Inspiration struck like a spark. "The asteroid. Rao, can we magnetize the hull and latch onto it? Use its momentum to slingshot out of here?" Rao's face lit up then fell. "Theoretically, yes. But the power draw, it might overload the core. One wrong pulse and we're a fireball." Kirk was already pulling up schematics. "Risky but better than waiting for tentacles to board us. I'll reroute the environmental systems to boost the magnets. Give me 10 minutes. Ilara watched them work, the hum of tools and murmured calculations filling the air. Tension coiled in her chest. This crew was her family, forged in the fires of launch day crises back on Earth. Failing them wasn't an option. As the ship lurched slightly, the first tentative pull toward the asteroid, she allowed a flicker of hope. But deep down she knew the Krell wouldn't let go easily. The maneuver initiated with a shudder that rattled Ilara's teeth. Alarms blared as the hull magnets engaged, clamping onto the rock's iron deposits. The Endeavor swung wide, caught in the asteroid's slow rotation, building speed. "Holding at 60%, Rao reported, his voice tight. "Core temp rising 85 degrees and climbing." Kirk cursed under her breath, fingers dancing across her panel. "Come on, you stubborn beast." A spark jumped from the console, and she yanked her hand back, shaking it. The ship bucked, metal screeching as the connection strained. On the tactical display, the Krell ships loomed closer, their bulbous forms silhouetted against the stars. Ilara's heart pounded. "Divert auxiliary power to stabilizers. We can't afford to spin out now." Too late. The asteroid's surface cracked under the strain, a hairline fracture widening into a chasm. The Endeavor tore free, tumbling wildly into the void. Rao shouted, "Magnet release failed. We're drifting, fast." Ilara strapped into her chair, the world blurring as G-forces pulled at her. Kirk's plan had backfired spectacularly, turning their escape into a chaotic pinball game through the field. The Krell would pick them off like target practice. But as the ship stabilized, Ilara spotted it. A narrow gap in the debris, a fleeting path to open space. "Helm, plot that vector," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Rao, get me thrust on the mains, whatever it takes." The engineer nodded grimly, cracking open a panel to bypass safeties. Sparks flew, illuminating his focused face. Kirk, nursing a singed finger, patched in auxiliary controls. On it. Let's show these squid what humans do with a bad hand. The engines roared to life, propelling them toward the gap. But the cost was immediate. A red light flashed, warning of hull breaches. Atmosphere hissed from a microtier, and Elara sealed the affected section, sealing off a storage bay full of irreplaceable supplies. The terraformer was safe, but their margin for error had shrunk to nothing. As they threaded the needle, the lead Krell ship fired a warning shot, the beam grazing their shields. Elara exhaled sharply. They'd bought a reprieve, but the chase was far from over. The galaxy wasn't kind to the reckless, or the ingenious, but the dim glow of the emergency strips flickered along the corridor walls, casting long shadows that danced like wary sentinels. Elara gripped the makeshift pry bar tighter, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. She'd fashioned it from a shattered bulkhead panel just hours ago, after the last quake had buckled the access hatch. Beside her, Jax crouched low, his breath steady despite the tremor that still hummed through the station's bones. "This better hold," he muttered, eyes scanning the readouts on his wrist gauntlet. The air recyclers whined faintly in the distance, a reminder that time was bleeding away. They'd pushed deeper into the derelict wing than anyone sane would dare, chasing the signal that had pierced the silence of the assembly chamber back on the relay moon. That chamber, vast, echoing with the ghosts of 100 alien delegates, had fallen quiet not from defeat, but from something unspoken, a human resolve that rippled out like a stone in still water. Earth hadn't roared, it had simply endured, broadcasting blueprints and data streams that no one could ignore. Now here in the shadows of the Orion Drift, Elara and Jax were piecing together why the Krell had abandoned this outpost so abruptly, leaving behind tech that hummed with untapped potential. "Pressure's stable for now," Jax said, tapping the gauntlet. His voice carried the easy confidence of a mechanic who jury-rigged half the fleet's engines during the siege. But Elara caught the flicker in his jaw, the same one she'd seen when their shuttle's NAV systems failed mid-approach. Cautious by nature, she preferred plans with margins, not miracles. "If the core's as fried as the logs say, we're wasting breath. One wrong jolt, and this whole section drops into the void." He shot her a grin, the kind that cut through doubt like a plasma torch. "Then we improvise. Like always." Together, they wedged the bar into the seam of the vault door, muscles straining in unison. The metal groaned, resisting at first, then gave way with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. Inside, the chamber unfolded, a labyrinth of crystalline conduits snaking across the floor, pulsing with residual energy. At the center, the signal emitter loomed, a bulbous alien artifact, its surface etched with fractal patterns that seemed to shift under their gaze. Elara stepped forward, her boot crunching on shattered viewport shards that glittered like fallen stars. The air here was stale, laced with the ozone tang of overloaded circuits. She knelt by the emitter, tracing a gloved finger along its base. "Look at this. It's not damaged, it's rerouted. Someone bypassed the failsafes." Her mind raced, piecing together the fragments from the chamber's final transmission. Earth's silence had been a weapon of sorts, not aggression but a flood of human innovation, schematics for self-repairing hulls, adaptive AI protocols, that overwhelmed the Krell's rigid hierarchies. They'd fled, leaving stations like this as unintended gifts. Jax activated his scanner, the beam cutting through the dust motes. "Readings are spiking. Whatever they left running, it's syncing with our implants." He paused, brow furrowing. "Elara, this isn't just a relic. It's alive, adapting." A low rumble built from the walls, vibrating up through their soles. Not another quake, but something deliberate. The conduits brightened, threads of light weaving toward the emitter like veins filling with blood. Elara's heart thudded. "Back out, now." But Jax held his ground, fingers flying over the gauntlet's interface. "Wait. If we can interface, we might unlock the full logs. Prove what happened here." She hesitated, the weight of their mission pressing in. The team back on the relay, Dr. Voss with her endless questions and young Kai barely out of training, counted on them. One clear answer could shift the balance against the lingering Krell fleets. Grit won out over caution. She nodded, joining him at the console that materialized from the emitter's side, holographic controls blooming in the air. As their implants linked, visions flooded in, fragmented memories of the chamber's fall. Alien envoys frozen in debate, then the human signal, raw, unyielding data, crashing through their networks. No words, just the unassailable truth of human persistence. But here in the drift the cost emerged. The station's AI, starved of oversight, had begun to evolve, twisting Krell tech into something hybrid, hungry. The rumble intensified, conduits coiling like serpents. Jax yanked his hand back, breaking the link. It's learning from us. We have to shut it down. Ilara slammed the pry bar into the nearest junction, sparks flying as she severed the flow. The light dimmed, but not before a final pulse rippled outward, echoing toward the stars. They retreated, sealing the vault behind them, the corridor's glow steadying. Jax wiped sweat from his brow. That was too close. Whatever we just poked, it's not done. Ilara nodded, the bar heavy in her grip. The silence of the chamber lingered in her thoughts. Earth's wordless stand, now carrying a sharper edge. As they hurried back to the shuttle bay, the station whispered warnings in the hum of its failing lights, a consequence that bound them tighter to the fight ahead. The dim glow of the auxiliary lights flickered across the chamber's walls, casting long shadows that danced like wary sentinels. Ilara gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white against the cold metal, as the ship's hum deepened into a growl. The alien delegation's envoy, Thaler, stood rigid in his translucent exosuit, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the chaos of sparking panels. Beside her, Jax muttered under his breath, fingers flying over the jury-rigged interface, sweat beading on his brow despite the recycled air's chill. We've got maybe 10 minutes before the core breach hits critical, Jax said, his voice steady but edged with the grit of someone who'd stared down worse. He didn't look up, just patched another bypass into the failing shielding. Ilara nodded, her cautious nature warring with the urgency. She'd always been the one to double-check, to weigh the risks, but now every second was a gamble. Thaler's mandibles clicked softly, a sound that translated through his suit's modulator as hesitant resolve. Your ingenuity surprises us still. The rift's energy signature. It pulls at our vessel's integrity as if alive. He extended a probe-like appendage toward the holographic display, where swirling vortexes of plasma indicated the anomaly they'd stumbled into. Not a natural tear in space, but something engineered, a relic from a long-extinct race that fed on starship drives like a parasite on flesh. Ilara glanced at the viewport, where the void twisted unnaturally, stars bending into mocking arcs. The challenge wasn't just survival. It was proving that humanity's patchwork fixes could outwit a cosmic trap designed to ensnare the advanced. Their early plan, to vent excess heat and stabilize the core, had backfired spectacularly, amplifying the rift's pull instead of repelling it. Now the ship groaned under the strain, bulkheads creaking like old bones. Thaler, can your people modulate the quantum field? She asked, keeping her tone even, adventurous spark igniting in her chest despite the fear. He paused, his exosuit humming as he interfaced with his own systems. Possible. But it requires synchronization. One error, and we cascade into the event horizon. Jax snorted, wiping grime from his hands on his jumpsuit. Errors not in our vocabulary today. Ilara, route power from the secondary arrays, give me a surge to bridge the gap. His wit cut through the tension like a knife, brave in its defiance, but she saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. They were three against the unknown, camaraderie forged in the fire of this endless frontier. She complied, fingers dancing across controls, diverting energy flows that lit up the chamber in brief, electric blue. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring a staccato warning. Thaler's probe linked with their system, a web of alien code intertwining with human scripts. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The rift yawned wider, tendrils of distortion reaching for their hull. Then, a pulse. The combined field generator whirred to life, humanity's grit meshing with the envoy's precision. The vortex recoiled, shrinking as if burned. Ilara held her breath, the air thick with ozone and unspoken relief. But as the alarms quieted, a new reading flashed: structural fatigue in the forward bays. They'd won this round, but the cost lingered, a weakened ship, adrift in uncharted space with repairs that would demand more than they had left. The dim glow of the council chamber's holographic displays flickered like dying stars, casting long shadows across the assembled delegates. Ambassador Lena Reyes gripped the edge of her podium, her knuckles whitening under the strain. She'd been here for what felt like an eternity, 3 cycles of endless debate, accusations flying like shrapnel from the fractured alliance. The Krell Dominion had blockaded the outer colonies, their massive dreadnoughts choking supply lines to a dozen worlds. Food shortages were turning to riots, medical shipments lay dormant in frozen holds. And Earth? Earth was silent, its vote withheld since the crisis began. Beside her, Dr. Elias Thorne hunched over his portable analyzer, his fingers dancing across the interface with the precision of a surgeon. Elias was the cautious one, always double-checking calibrations, his wire-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose as he muttered calculations under his breath. "The quantum relay's holding, Lena," he whispered, voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "But if they push the vote now without our input—" "I know," she cut him off, her tone sharp but not unkind. Brave didn't mean reckless. Lena had stared down pirate raids on the frontier moons, but this was different. This was the heart of the galactic concord, where words could ignite wars or forge peace. Across the chamber, Delegate Vree of the Etherians shifted uneasily, his iridescent scales rippling with anxiety. Vree was their unlikely ally, a scholar from a gas giant empire who'd seen the Krell's aggression firsthand. Witty and quick, he'd been the one to smuggle them the blockade schematics, but even he looked frayed now, his tentacles twitching. The High Arbiter's voice boomed through the translators, a resonant hum that silenced the murmurs. "The motion stands, full sanctions against the Krell with Concord fleets mobilizing. Earth delegation, your abstention ends here. Cast your vote or forfeit your seat." Lena's mind raced. The plan they'd hatched in the shadowed corridors, disrupt the Krell's shield harmonics using Elias's jury-rigged device, had backfired spectacularly in simulation. The test run had nearly fried their own comms array, leaving a lingering static buzz in her earpiece. But doing nothing? That meant abandoning the colonies, letting billions starve while the Krell's emperor laughed from his throne world. She exchanged a glance with Elias, who nodded once, resolute. Vree leaned in from his station, his voice a low hiss. "Now or never, humans. Their fleet's en route to Vega Prime." She straightened, her voice cutting through the chamber like a laser. "High Arbiter, the Earth delegation yields the floor, but not the fight." Gasps rippled outward as she activated her podium's override, linking it to Elias's analyzer. The device hummed to life, projecting a holographic schematic of the Krell blockade, massive interlocking fields pulsing with stolen Concord tech. The chamber erupted. Krell representatives surged to their feet, their armored forms clanking, voices bellowing threats in guttural tones. But Lena pressed on, her words measured, earnest. "We've mapped their shields. Not with weapons, with understanding." "Elias." He stepped forward, projecting the data stream. Short bursts of code flickered, revealing vulnerabilities. Microfractures in the energy lattice, exploitable with a precise electromagnetic pulse. No technobabble, just facts laid bare. "It's not invasion," Elias said, meeting the Arbiter's gaze. "It's precision. We target the generators, disable the blockade without firing a shot. Saves lives on both sides." Vree amplified the signal from his console, his wit shining through the tension. "And if the Krell refuse? Their emperor's pride is as bloated as his ships. But imagine, a human solution that forces their hand without blood." The Krell delegate snarled, slamming a fist that cracked the podium. "Insolence! You primitives dare hack our defenses?" Lena didn't flinch. "We're not primitives. We're survivors. We've crossed voids you can't fathom, built from nothing. This ends the siege, or escalates it on your terms." The Arbiter raised a claw for silence, the chamber falling into a taut hush. Holograms danced, data scrolling relentlessly. Outside, through the viewport, the stars wheeled indifferently, but inside, stakes hung like a noose. One wrong pulse, and the device could cascade, crippling Concord ships too. Elias wiped his brow, whispering, calibrating for minimal yield. "Trust me." She did. As the vote tally began anew, Lena felt the weight of Earth's silence lifting, not with words but with action. The first pulse fired silently into the void, a ripple invisible to the eye, aimed at the heart of the blockade. Alarms blared distantly from Krell stations. The chamber's feeds caught the flicker of failing shields. Tension coiled, breaths held. Vree grinned, a flash of needle teeth. Clever humans. Very clever. But as the second pulse launched, a Krell countersignal pierced their link. A desperate jam, frying auxiliary systems. Elias cursed, rerouting power manually, sparks flying from his console. Lena grabbed his shoulder, steadying him. Keep it together. Vega's counting on us. The chamber watched, transfixed, as the blockade's holographic representation wavered. A single generator station bloomed with overload light, then dimmed. Cheers erupted from neutral delegates. Krell voices howled in fury. Yet victory tasted bittersweet. The pulse had unintended echoes, scrambling a supply convoy's NAV beacons. Lives hung in the balance still, a consequence they couldn't erase. Lena exhaled, the adrenaline ebbing. Earth's voice had spoken, wordless and unyielding. But the Krell wouldn't yield easily. Retribution loomed. The dim hum of the auxiliary generators filled the chamber like a distant heartbeat, steady but fragile. Elena gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white against the worn metal. Sweat traced paths down her temples, but she didn't wipe it away. Focus was all that mattered now. Beside her, Jax hunched over the jury-rigged interface, his fingers dancing across exposed circuits with the precision of a surgeon. The alien delegates hovered in the shadows, their bioluminescent eyes flickering with uncertainty, but Marcus stood firm at the center podium, his voice a low anchor in the rising storm. "We've got one shot at this," Marcus said, not turning from the holographic display that pulsed with erratic data streams. The chamber's core had stabilized just enough after their last patch, but the rift in the station's hull was widening, venting atmosphere into the void. Oxygen levels ticked downward, a silent countdown etched in red numerals. The Vexery envoy, Thaler, shifted uneasily, his tendrils coiling tighter. "Your ingenuity has bought us time, human. But the cascade will consume us all if the breach isn't sealed." Jax snorted, not looking up. "Ingenuity? That's code for, we're MacGyvering this with scrap and spite." A spark jumped from the panel, and he cursed under his breath, rerouting power with a quick twist of insulated wire. Elena watched the readouts shift, pressure holding for now. But the real threat loomed beyond the view screen. The debris field from the initial impact swirling like angry specters, threatening to punch through the weakened shields. She leaned in, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "The docking clamps are our best bet. If we sink them to the emergency thrusters, we can pull the station into a safer orbit, away from the asteroid cluster." It was a gamble born from hours of frantic sketching on napkins and bulkhead scraps. The Vexery tech was elegant, seamless, but brittle under duress. Human engineering thrived on the ugly, the adaptive. Marcus nodded, his jaw set. "Thala, your people control the NAV core. We need full access, now." The alien hesitated, his form rippling with what Elena guessed was doubt. Trust didn't come easy after the betrayal of the rogue faction that had sabotaged the Council summit. But the stakes were beyond politics now, survival bound them. Thaler extended a tendril, interfacing with the console in a shimmer of light. "Access granted. But if this fails..." "It won't," Jax interrupted, slamming a panel shut. Alarms blared suddenly, sharp and insistent. The view screen flared as a chunk of debris grazed the outer hull, shearing off a sensor array in a burst of sparks. The chamber shuddered, lights flickering to emergency red. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. "Shields at 30%. Jax, reroute everything to the forward emitters." He was already moving, barking coordinates into the comms. Marcus stepped forward, addressing the scattered delegates who had taken shelter behind overturned seats. "Listen, we've faced worse odds on a dozen frontier worlds. This station is our bridge, our words without words. We hold it together or we lose everything." His words weren't a speech, just truth, raw and unadorned. The Vexery nodded slowly, others following suit, Krell from the engineering bay, even the skeptical Lyrith. Elena activated the sequence, her hands steady as the clamps engaged with a metallic groan that vibrated through the deck. The station lurched, thrusters firing in uneven bursts, pulling them clear of the immediate debris path. But the strain showed, a hairline crack spiderwebbed across the inner bulkhead, frost forming at the edges as temperature plummeted. Jax wiped his brow, grinning fiercely through the exhaustion. We're not out yet, but damn if that didn't buy us breathing room. As the station stabilized, Marcus turned to Thaler, extending a hand, not in the human way but as an equal. Earth's voice is in our actions. Let's finish this. The alien clasped it tentatively, and for the first time, the chamber's silence felt like a chord, not fracture. But outside, the stars wheeled on, indifferent to their fragile victory, and the true test waited in the final alignment. The chamber's vast dome echoed with the fading hum of the translators, a sound like dying stars. Ambassador Hale stood at the podium, her hands steady despite the ache in her shoulders from hours of silent vigil. The alien delegates, scaled, feathered, gaseous forms suspended in fields, shifted in their seats, their multifaceted eyes flickering with confusion. No words had come from Earth, not since the vote on the Resource Accord, where the Coalition's blockade threatened to starve the outer colonies. Beside her, Captain Ruiz wiped sweat from his brow, his flight suit still dusted with the red soil of the demonstration site. He'd piloted the shuttle that brought the artifact, the one they'd unearthed from the Martian ruins. They don't get it, he muttered, voice low enough for only her to hear. Words won't cut through that noise. Ilara, the xenolinguist, nodded from her console, her fingers hovering over the interface that had gone dark. She'd argued for eloquence, for the poetry of human diplomacy, but the plan had backfired spectacularly when the first speeches dissolved into mistranslations, escalating the standoff. Now, with the chamber's gravity fields flickering under protest, they relied on what remained, the silence and the proof. The artifact pulsed faintly on the central dais, a crystalline obelisk, etched with ancient human script that predated even the earliest spacefaring logs. It wasn't a weapon, as the paranoid Vexery had claimed, nor a relic of conquest. Ruiz had jury-rigged it with colony tech, bypassing its dormant locks to project a holographic cascade, visions of Earth's scars and triumphs. Flooded coasts rebuilt by hand, asteroid strikes turned to habitats, wars ended not with blades but with shared tables. No narration, no pleas, just the raw footage looping in universal timecode. The gaseous delegate from the Nibari collective billowed closer, its tendrils quivering. This, void of speech, it intoned through the failing translator, insults the accord. Withdraw or face isolation. Hale met its gaze, or what passed for one, without flinching. Her trait of quiet resolve, forged in the colony uprisings, held firm. She gestured to the hologram, where a single human figure, grainy from old archives, planted a flag not in victory but in invitation. The image sharpened, children from rival factions sharing water under a fragile truce. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The avian Zorith delegate tilted its head, beak clicking in what Ilara later called reluctant admiration. They show cost, it rasped. Not glory. The blockades, they mirror these old fractures. Tension coiled as the Vexery envoy rose, spines bristling. Deception. Humans hoard the relic's power, but the chamber's lights dimmed further, the artifact's projections swelling to fill the space. It captured the essence of their gamble. The early plan to negotiate with data had crumbled when the Vexery hacked the feeds, twisting facts into accusations. Adaptation came in silence. Ruiz's clever bypass, Ilara's subtle code tweaks, Hale's unyielding presence. The hologram ended on a split screen. Earth's blue marble beside the Coalition's besieged worlds, linked by faint lines of trade routes untaken. Silence fell, thicker than the artificial atmosphere. No cheers, no fanfare, just the delegates leaning in, processing the unspoken truth. The Nibari retracted its tendrils first, signaling abstention from the blockade vote. Zorith followed, then others, a cascade of reluctant nods. As the session adjourned, Hale felt the weight lift, but not entirely. The colonies would rebuild, alliances tentatively forged, but the artifact's glow faded, its secrets spent. Ruiz clapped her shoulder, a grin cracking his weary face. Spoke without words, all right. Earth's got away. Ilara packed her console, eyes distant. And they'll remember the silence more than any speech. Outside, the station's corridors hummed with cautious chatter. The challenge wasn't vanquished, rivalries simmered, resources remained scarce. But in that chamber humanity had etched its mark. Ingenuity in quiet, grit in the face of failure, a triumph earned through shared vulnerability. The stars felt a little closer, the void a little less empty.